What's the most common question people ask when they're learning how to mix? It's what piece of hardware should they buy for their stereo bus if they could only buy one? So I want to pose it to you guys so you guys can tell me what you think, because I know everybody has their own opinions on this. I also can tell you from experience that if you were to look for one piece of gear that does everything, even if it's within one genre, like if this particular person said for R&B, one compressor, what would I get? The truth is, anything you buy is not going to work on every song, because every time you change the instrumentation, you change the tempo, it's going to require different things. You'll always have a different amount of stuff to deal with, different amount of vocals, different amount of harmonies. The whole thing is going to combine to create something different. So when I think about this, I think I've clearly learned that if you buy one piece of gear, it's never the best piece of gear to use on everything. But it will work if it's the right piece of gear on a lot of things. Well, it'll work well, but it's not the best piece of gear for any one thing. You know, this reminds me of like Pert Plus shampoo and conditioner in one. It's a good shampoo, it's a good conditioner, but it ain't great shampoo or great conditioner. It's just a combination, so you don't have to split it up. So when I think about this, I think the thing I used for so long that works so well, and you guys already know, the Neve, it's an R&D, so Rupert Neve Designs, MBP, like Paul, because that master bus processor has a compressor in it, a limiter in it, the stereo field editor section in it. It's got red and blue silk, so you have the option of adding flavor, a little bit of character, compression, limiting. You just have a lot you could do in one box. And I can tell you from experience, when you set that thing to RMS, because it tends to sound different if you set it to peak, the way it's built, there is a little bit of a different flavor just by flipping from RMS to peak. If you set it to RMS, it can work very transparently. And most of the time, it could be doing a lot, but you don't really notice that much. And a lot of people like that unit. I personally loved it, and I used it for a very long time. Now I don't use it at all because I'm primarily focused in the box. However, I used that, and then I used an SSL Fusion. Now, the SSL Fusion does some of the similar things, but completely different. Like the stereo field editor on the Rupert Neve Designs MBP does a thing where you can center the lows, you can spread out, the high mids or the highs or whatever you want. But that stereo field editor sounds very, very different than the space and width that comes on the Fusion. Very different. So sometimes I'd use them both, little on one, little on the other. And that combination had a tendency to sound very good. The Fusion's high frequency compressor also, when you hold the button down, has that hidden feature where it basically turns into a full bandwidth compressor. So you get a lot out of using those two pieces of gear together. If I just had one and I had to pick, I would have picked the R&D MBP over the Fusion. But having both is more flavor because of the EQ. You have that violet EQ on the Fusion. You have the drive and density to dial in even more saturation if you want. So there's benefits to that. Is it the best piece of gear in the world? No. And the price reflects it. It's not cheap. The Fusion's great. But at the same time, that combined with the MBP, I felt like my bases were covered almost consistently no matter what I wanted to do. And that's really what I was looking for. A workhorse type of setup that could do multiple things. Now, if you were going to be focused on one thing, like something that doesn't do all the stuff, because that's really what I wanted, was how few things can I buy? Because as soon as you go down this path of buying things, you're always going to need to buy more things. That's why the guys that own hardware, they don't own just one thing that they use or two things. They own a bunch of it. Over time, they keep buying it. So just be prepared. That's a symptom of buying stuff, is buying more stuff. So if you look at it like you need one thing on your master bus or your mix bus or the two bus, the ice cream bus, the final boss bus, you need something there, you're going to need more stuff, like no matter what. So it's never one thing. So if I were to look at it now with my current perspective, it would be, knowing I'm going to be buying more stuff, maybe don't look at buying all the stuff in one box. However, if you wanted to do a thing like cap it and say, I refuse to go down this rabbit hole of keep spending my money on stuff, I'm only going to spend a certain amount and I'm going to make it work, then those boxes that do a lot, they are very valuable because you can get away with much less, buying less stuff. But that comes with that understanding, that discipline. I'm not going to keep buying stuff. Whereas if you were to look at it like an SSL bus comp works on a lot of stuff, or like the Allen Smart version, basically just one that does like the SSL bus comp with a few more features on it kind of thing, it'll work for a lot of stuff. But will it work for everything? Maybe not. Will it be as transparent? Maybe not. Are you going to want something else like the flavor of an API 2500? Maybe. Are you going to want to have a fatso at some point? Maybe. Are you going to want a couple distressors at some point? Maybe. But when I think about like Mixbus stuff, for stuff where you want to have a compressor add mojo, feel, and flavor and hear it, I think API 2500. And if you want that same kind of thing but slightly different, I think SSL bus comp. And if you want that constant thickening that has like a very certain flavor, the what is it, the diode bridge compressor, that like a Neve 33609, very particular flavor. If you've ever used the Shelford channel that Rupert Neve Designs makes, that's basically one channel of that diode bridge deal, and the 33609 is a stereo version of it. But that, the Shelford does EQ and stuff also. But the point is, they built that because people like the flavor of that diode bridge sound. And that has a particular sound. Lots of people love that thing. And it's been on countless mix buses. So it's a question of, do you want that? Now, if you were to look at this like, what's the thing that engineers dream about, but they don't buy because it's too expensive, but it's one piece of gear that people dream about, because I know I did, it would probably be the unfair child, or, a fair child type situation. But then you got to look at the downsides. It comes with tons of tubes. When you got tubes, you got to replace tubes. This is coming from a guy who plays guitar. My guitar amps constantly, you use them enough, you're going to have to change the tubes. So anything tube related, just think of a little extra maintenance involved. That's how I look at it. Now, another thing a lot of guys dream about is the Elysia Alpha compressor. So those are the things people dream about, I would say, like, because they're so expensive, they're almost out of reach. Now, they're out of reach for most people, and there's a reason I don't own them, because they're crazy expensive. And I wound up putting money into other things rather than that, like, for example, the Neve 5060 combined with those other things I mentioned. And when you add it all up, could you have instead bought an alpha compressor? Maybe. An unfair child? Maybe. There was a point in time a little while ago where that unfair child was going for almost half price, something like 60%. Was, something like that. And I remember the deal was crazy back around November or so of 2024. And in moments like that, those moments are designed for people to be like, I'm going to do it. But at the same time, when I think about that stuff, I got to tell you where I'm at now. Where I'm at now is the understanding that gear, people like it. People like to own it, like to see it, like to touch it. As a result of liking to see it and touch it, because so many people with gear don't actually change the settings, because if you do, you got to note the settings you changed, and that's a huge pain that most people don't want to deal with. So as a result, what happens? You look at other things that are digitally recallable as possibilities, which leads you towards Wes Audio and, the NG bus, or any of the things that you can basically get your settings all to pop up every time you open the thing up, which is its own thing altogether. I know a lot of guys I spoke to who are like, if I'm going to spend serious money, I want it to be on the stuff I've been dreaming about, not on another company's version of something I've been dreaming about. So that's the toss up. But everybody has their own feelings on that. Some people just want it to do a thing, and you're fine with any sort of difference in sound and this and that. So you're just good with whatever. You don't care who makes it. And that's a very different thing. labels, people want to buy clothes with labels on them. Everybody has their own view on whether that's something you should do or not. Some people need to have the thing with the label and the name, and some people don't care. It's really personal taste. I can't lead you down a path of yes or no or what you want to do on that. But what I could tell you is, if you're thinking about one piece of gear, there's another one that always came across the desk in my head of like, this is something that's really cool, that it would always just keep popping up. People would mention it all the time. So I want to talk about it real quick. Louder Than Liftoff's Silver Bullet. That thing has like mojo settings on it where it gives you several different options for tone shaping and flavor. It's a very unique piece. So you should look at that as something, because early on when you're getting stuff, that's an interesting thing that you may find a nice use for. So it has different flavor compressor options, and the Mark II version offers more than the Mark I. So if you're looking at used ones and stuff, just know that if you get Mark I, you're missing out on a few of the amazing things they added on Mark II. So all this stuff is critical to put with a little bit of a caveat here. You don't need any of this stuff to make great music. If you make it where your ears are listening at a level that they would need to be in order to even use that type of gear correctly, you could dial this stuff in using plugins. And I would venture to say that if you have one piece of hardware and you're using it wrong, that's always going to sound worse than having 100 different plugins and you're using them right. So it's not you can't get into this thing of which is better, which is not. They all have gear has its benefits. Plugins have their benefits, and the versatility of being able to use something with a completely different sound and does something else is a benefit of plugins. The ability to switch it around. Whereas in hardware form, you're dropping dough every time you're switching things around. The benefit of hardware is the sweet spot for what is good might extend a bit further on many different pieces of gear. So as it extends a bit further, it means you might be able to mess it up a little bit more and still be okay. That's really what I'm talking about. So, but you shouldn't look at that as necessarily a great thing. Something I realized when I went to because I was hybrid for so long, then I decided I'm going to focus on making mixes in the box that make me happy. What I realized when I did that was it's way harder. For somebody coming from hybrid especially, it's very hard. What that meant to me, though, was now I got to buckle in, lock in, and get good at figuring out whatever I don't know in order to make this work. So it rejuvenated my sense of learning, my sense of I don't know everything, my sense of I got to work harder, I got to keep going to the car, I got to do all these checks. Like, it rejuvenated my sense of I know it's possible and I got to make it work. To me, there's nothing that replaces that. If you decide to work in a certain way when you're just starting, just realize you might have to learn how to work in another way at some point, if for no other reason. It will benefit you so much in terms of what you know, because you can't just be comfortable and keep growing and learning. You have to be uncomfortable at some point in order to keep growing and learning. So doing the harder thing, in my opinion, is great. And that's what people will tell you. A lot of them will tell you that it's harder and it's not the norm. It's the outliers that are able to make mixes in the box sound as good as hardware, or close to it, or indistinguishable, or whatever you want to call it. But the point is, that's not the norm. That's just a select few. Why would you intend to make all your decisions on what you buy and what you do and how you work based on the outliers? Why would you do that? You should do the thing everybody's been doing the longer time, the more people, the majority. That's a thought process. But in my opinion, I look at it like, it's not that. It's what you learn from doing whatever it is you don't know how to do that actually makes you more capable of doing better work. So as a result, if I were to stay hybrid, I would have never learned all the stuff I picked up by forcing myself to try to get happy mixing in the box. I would have never learned that. And at the same token, when I started years back on Pro Tools LE7, everything I did was in the box when it came to mixing. So I started there. Then I felt what you guys probably feel who are starting out, which is I got to get something to make my stuff better. I'm obviously handicapped by in the box. So I started to accumulate stuff to go hybrid. Then I got to where I'm at, where it's like I don't want to use the hybrid, which allowed me to keep learning and keep getting better. So it's this constant back and forth. And I find the more people do it for a really long time, the more that happens. And a lot of guys who use hardware can also mix in the box perfectly fine because they went through that hard learning process of figuring out what they didn't know, or maybe they came from that. So it's a constant back and forth, and nobody should tell you what's right, what's wrong, what can be done, what can't. Hardware's always better. And this is not, every time I read that stuff, I'm just like, that's a short-sighted person who doesn't realize the benefits of doing the harder thing, or it's somebody who really wants you to hear their agenda. Hear me. I have an opinion about this, and it's the right one. I got news for you. There's no right one. There's no right side of anything. There's only your side and what you believe right now. And if you hold on to that belief with dear life and you never want to let it go, you are not as open-minded as a result, and you are also not experiencing the full potential and growth that you could experience. That's the truth. You have to be willing to let go of your beliefs in order to consider other people's point of views, because as soon as you think you're right all the time, you're not. And not only are you not right all the time, you're just not as great as you could be. That's the truth. You stop learning when you think that. So I hope we're all on the same page. Let me know what you guys think the right thing is for that one piece of gear, because I'm sure there's 100 things I didn't mention. Those are just the things that, keep me up at night. That's really where it is. And I have to say, I'm somebody who really believes, from where I was taught, that converters matter. So, there's a reason I own Burl converters and JCF converters also, and dangerous AD convert, convert AD plus. And before, I had 16 Apogee AD 16Xs because those have their own flavor. Like, there's a reason I have all these. Once I basically upgraded from the Apogee AD 16X to trying the dangerous AD, to the Burl, to the JCF. And in my opinion, the greatness that they roll with is about in that order. It works like that. The JCF is at the top for what I consider the best sounding converters. The Burl is right below that. They have their own flavor and people love them. And I got to tell you, to track, sometimes I almost prefer all that gooey, warm, gushy niceness you get out of those Burls. It's a beautiful thing. But like I said, there's something magic about that JCF that, in my opinion, it does trump it. And then you got, what else you got? The dangerous has its own thing and still has a use, or I would have gotten rid of it already. So all these things, they do their own thing. And like I said, there's no right way. So I'm curious what you guys think, what you like, what you think people should know about. Throw it in there. Everyone's got to hear it, because this is stuff that's going to come up for the next forever, the foreseeable forever. So Evan Jaffe Custom Cut Studios, comment, like, subscribe. I appreciate it. Helps the channel. You guys got this. Take it easy.